All right, make sure I'm unmuted. Um, I thought I would try to start up a live stream. Jacob, I was gonna do a Bible study with him last night, but I didn't realize it's a week of Passover for him, so he couldn't do that, and so I wasn't prepared to do it on my own, so I canceled it last minute. But I may try to do another Bible-based I don't know, live stream some point because I'm not sure how. I'm trying to stream on his channel while he's gone as well. I'm streaming this to the Randos channel also. For anyone who wants to join, I've never streamed there before, but I got the okay from Jacob. But the reason I started this, I guess, was because Luke Thompson had sent me this a video of Sam and Cassidy. They had a conversation, I think, on her channel. Well, here, let me post the link in the comment section if anyone does want to join. So their conversation was about church participation, and it was really good. But it was kind of, they got into, I guess, what recently has happened to Sam, and I don't know all the details of it. I've never actually spoken to Cassidy. I know who she is from this circle we're involved in, and Sam, I think I've spoken to him maybe twice, briefly, probably through this channel, Jacob's channel, where he's hopped on. But I didn't know why. It just kind of sparked some thoughts, so I thought I could maybe just share with my mind. Then, if it goes somewhere, if anyone wants to join, and we could just see where the conversation goes. But I don't. I have to go into work, so I probably only have about an hour. But the reason this sparked some thoughts is because I've recently said multiple times this year where I don't even know how well I know how I could call myself a Christian. It's getting to the point where, like, at least twice this year, I've had to just throw up my hands and be like, well, I guess I'm not a Christian then. And this has been in conversations with Christians, which is, I was talking to my friend Mitch about this. We've kind of gone into a little more detail on this, and he's very helpful in helping me wrestle with this and helping me collect my thought on this. Because it's not that I don't want to call myself a Christian. Like, it's not like I want to be one of those people who's like, oh, I'm too cool to be put in a category or something like that. Because I always called myself a Christian growing up. It's just that here's the thing. It gets with, like, Sam Adams, it's always this divide over the Trinity because he's a Unitarian. So he gets some of these confessions of Christianity that involve the Trinity. There's certain confessions and propositions involved in Christianity that you are almost required to affirm, and I'm not against that because, like, that's totally fine for me. You go into, because it's kind of the idea of inclusion, exclusion. If you have a circle, like, you're automatically drawing a circle, there's things excluded outside of it, and so you're saying these propositions are how we define. If you call yourself a Christian, this is what you affirm, this is what you believe. And so it's like, if I can't affirm those things, then I feel dishonest to the category Christian if I'm calling myself that, and then people find out, oh, well, why would you call yourself a Christian? Because Christians don't believe that. They don't believe what you believe. So that's one area I've been struggling, because I'd like to call myself a Christian because I grew up a Christian. I still believe in Christ. I believe in like the whole entire story of the Bible, and of the Gospels, and I don't have a problem even believing in the resurrection and the ascension and all those things. But there's certain propositions that I still wrestle with, and so when you get into asking questions with those propositions, it's like, or with the doctrinal creeds, I guess what I've struggled with is in conversations, I've just kind of come to the point where, like, I don't know. It's not that I feel uncomfortable saying I'm Christian. It's just like I don't know how. It's the same. I guess a good example would be it's the same way I wouldn't call myself a Catholic. I grew up Protestant, so obviously, like I wouldn't go and call myself a Catholic because I'm not involved in the Catholic Church. I haven't been baptized by the Catholic Church. Like all these things, and so I don't have a problem with the exclusion though. Like I think they should maintain that identity structure, and I shouldn't go in and try to be like, oh, they're being unfair, and try to tear down walls. And this isn't. I'm not saying like Sam. I don't think does this at all. Because Sam was making a good point where he was saying like if you, it would almost be good to have these different thinkers within these communities because they could help resolve some tension and some issues where people can think and be open-minded within these groups. So I'm not even sure if I'm making sense in all this, or I'm trying to talk about. But I said, I understand what you're saying. This is why. So I understand what you're saying. This is why I say that I was raised Christian rather than I was Christian. Unsure if I ever believed the propositions. You are suffering like all of us by being overinformed. Seems like an overfocus on knowledge. Thanks, Luke. I'm a fan of yours as well. So the yeah, it's just weird. Like I've said before, I feel more comfortable if I'm going to identify myself as calling myself a pagan, because it's just like I feel like that's easier to identify what that is. And I don't mind calling myself a Christian. It's just like collectively, it's the way words work. Like collectively, I don't get to pick a word and say this is what this means. Like it's a kind of a collective decision. Like I have some say in that, but it still is a collective decision. So if Christian or Christianity means a certain thing now, even if the thing is different than what it used to mean, then I don't know. Hey, Christian.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good, good, good.
Thanks for joining me.
Um, yeah, no problem. I like you. I only have a limited kind of time frame here, but I just wanted to interject really quickly, if I could, just in response to one of
Yeah.
the things you just said. You're mentioning how you know there's this reluctance to, in certain circumstances, call yourself a Christian because of the connotations that come along with it, or the understandings of the other people, like, oh, well, if you don't believe this, then blah blah blah. And what it brought to my mind is something I've been thinking of for a little while now, is how some of us are like every collection of people seems to need sentries, or these people that patrol the perimeters, right? Either watching out for danger, researching to bring back in, informing the external world of this group, like stuff like that. There's people that are particularly well suited to this sort of either like patrolling the boundary, or sort of going out and exploring, coming back in, going out and exploring, coming back in. And it seems like most of those kind of people will, or maybe all of those people that are best suited for that, will not fit perfectly into the category of the group from which they are going out to patrol and explore and stuff like that. So it's just kind of a thought to give you some peace about it, if you were struggling with that. It's like, because that's something I struggle with too. I kind of have a similar there's certain things I just don't talk about with other Christians, even other Christians that I really respect. I basically have to come to this little corner of the internet and and talk about that stuff instead. And it's not like we feel like I'm not a Christian, but that part of my Christianity that I feel is very important, I'm just reluctant to kind of talk about that with other people. And sometimes it makes me feel like an outsider, but I have to remind myself, like, I'm not really exactly an outsider. Like, I'm still very much part of that body, but I'm just a part of that body that also happens to, whatever, touch on the boundaries, or something like that.
Yeah, no, I really like that example. I was actually thinking that right as you were beginning to talk, I was thinking about Watch Dogs and stuff. You know how it says, because I've often thought this before in Revelation, it says outside are the dogs, and people will always be like, well, dogs don't go to heaven. See right there. And that doesn't necessarily mean that. It just means that dogs are outside. Like that's what they do. They're outside the perimeter. They're watchdogs. Like they're like the centurions, like you're talking about. And so there's a way that they don't necessarily fit in. Like they're not in the circle. They're kind of on the outside, on the fringes, like Game of Thrones, like the Watchers on the Wall. They're like the kind of the rejects of society. But I guess it's like I don't know. A lot of times in churches, I don't know that there's space for the heretics. And I don't know that there should be. That's one thing that's kind of hard to navigate. Like I'm kind of like you. The church I'm in right now, they're just filled with love, and I don't get into theological discussions or debates. But I think even if I did, they would probably just they'd probably be fine with it. They'd just be like, well, just don't cheer, and they'd be like, oh, that's just Jason. He's just weird and thinks weird things. So they'd probably have a space for me to still be included, where I could wrestle with those questions and things like that. But I think a lot of places don't necessarily have that. Getting cast out, like Sam was talking about, is incredibly, yeah, it's almost like worse than death. So I don't know. And that seems to happen a lot too. And I mean, that kind of gets into the whole idea. Like I know Jacob a while back was talking about Protestantism, and people were talking about the spirit of Protestantism. And it seems like there's even a dual way of thinking of that, because there's like some people that are just like that they're talking about, I think, is kind of rebellion, and people that will go into the circle and then try to raise a ruckus and try to cause protest and rebellion and destroy or something like that. But then there's the other side of Protestantism where it's kind of like Sam, and they don't even necessarily do anything. They're just more like, I think this, I can't help thinking this, and then they get kicked out. And it seems like that is a lot of Protestantism as well, where it's not really rebellious. It's just kind of they get pushed out. Hey, Andrew, what's up?
How's it been? How's
How
it
you
been?
doing? Oh,
Good.
I'm good. Good. This is Christian, by the way. Christian, this is Andrew.
Hello.
Hey, nice to meet you. Just doing some dishes, so I'm gonna mute myself a little bit.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah. So you got any thoughts on this, Andrew?
You were talking about the whatever cultural term of Protestant, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that?
Yeah. And
I
just the
think,
whole idea of being, included and excluded from church, and how to participate. When you're in this circle talking about all these things, and you go get in like real church, and it's like you talk about this stuff, and it's like, oh, you shouldn't even be thinking about these things. What are you doing? But anyway, go ahead, man. Sorry. Couldn't mean to interrupt.
no, you're good. I think Jacob and other people in this little corner have done well to show that a lot of Protestant culture has been incorporated into other traditions, often for their benefit. I'm gonna get into me going into an Oriental Orthodox church, but part of going to an Oriental Orthodox church is that like Protestantism has not been incorporated into that church. Like you can tell they're kind of trying, right? Like some of the deacons there will be like friendly to me in a kind of a Protestant way, but yeah, it's very much like an Orthodox church that's been plopped right down in the middle of California.
That's funny. But there's a way I'm not necessarily against that, though. Like, I don't even mind. This is a little bit of like even what Hezi and Jacob were arguing about in that other, I don't know if arguing is the term they want to use, debating about, but just about even when they were talking about their own traditions and scripture, it's like you can be more, as was made a point, you can be more hard-lined on these things. You can constrict more. I'm fine with that. Or you can be more open and loose. And I don't really mind either way, because I think being more orderly, more defined allows for a better formed identity, and that's fine. But then it's like if if I don't find myself in that identity, I don't necessarily get, personally, I don't really get hurt about it. That's why I'm at this point now where I'm like, if this is collectively in whatever the world, in this country, in my state, if this is what Christianity is, then I don't want to be untrue and going like, I don't want to destroy that definition. I will say, yeah, I believe in Jesus. I believe he's the Son of God. I believe he died on the cross. I will affirm all those things. I have no problem with that. But if there's certain things where they're like, well, you this Christians don't believe this, then I don't want to be like, I'm like, all right, well then I just shouldn't go around saying I'm a Christian because I feel like I'm being dishonest to the collective in a way. But I have no problem them even constricting more and being like, this is what a Christian is, or this is what Eastern Orthodox is, or this is that, because I feel like we do that all the time. You have to do that everywhere with every identity. But then it's still kind of, that question remains of like, the more you do that, I mean, you have a closed circle, but eventually that has to break open and give birth to something new. Or at least that's the idea of it. And so, and how does that happen without all this? I mean, maybe it just involves tension and all this struggle and things like that. I guess that's kind of what, I don't even know if this is making sense, what I'm trying to get at here. I'm seeing it in my head as like a circle is a womb, and so you have this thing in the womb, and then it has to give birth to something new. So even in Christianity, when it started, you have Christians. These are simple beliefs that they believe. Now you have, then there's Catholicism, and there's this Christianity, this Christian, like different. They're like sister religions almost in denominations to Christianity, but fundamentally at their core, they should all be the same. I guess you would say seed or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm going to go off on a little tangent here, but
Yeah.
with Oriental Orthodox churches, they tend to be, in terms of history, they get taken over by the Muslims and then they just ossify from there, right? So my priest will talk about how like Coptic Orthodoxy starts dying out in the cities, and so they take stuff from the monastic tradition. And so like Oriental Orthodoxy nowadays is like really reverent. Even it's just about the longest liturgies I've ever seen. And the theology also remains the same. They start integrating it into the liturgy so that everyone knows that's the words that they're using and that's the tradition that we're upholding, and yada, yada, yada. And so you have these little historical churches from the 3rd, 4th century that are just there. And you were talking about this whatever seed or whatever that grows into a different plant. But when you have this like calcified seed and the plant doesn't recognize it, then I think that's a problem for when the plant tries to give birth, you know? So part of what I'm worried about is these orthobros that are attacking Oriental Orthodoxy. It's like they're not recognizing their roots, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do think that interfaith dialogue between Christians is important. And I do worry about the Protestant lack of church history, knowledge of church history, you know? So
Yeah.
I think at least the apostolic churches should be, you know, aware of and communicating with each other.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. You said about the calcified seed, yeah, where it becomes too hardened, and then it has to. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Egypt for some reason, like where it's just kind of Egypt is clamping down more and more and more, and then God's like, "Let my people go," and then they're like, "No, it's kind of further hardening or something." Christian, you got any thoughts? What's going on in your head?
think like I went through a season where it was like several years where I kind of refused to call myself a Christian. And sort of for similar reasons of the stuff that you were talking about, Jason, just like I just found myself either believing things that it didn't seem like many other Christians believed, or not believing things that most other Christians seem to believe. And then also just, I don't know, I had some friends who were Christians who were very like harsh and judgmental, blah, 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 like that kind of stuff. So I was just like, I don't want to be kind of lumped in with that kind of stuff. That's not really, but I think one thing that I try to be mindful about is like tailoring how I talk about my faith depending on the person I'm talking to. I'm trying to get more wise about that. There's still times where I'll say something, you know, and I see the look on the other person's face or something, and I'm like, oh, whoops.
Yeah.
I thought it was safe for me to say that, but I guess it wasn't. And yeah, I mean, I get where you're coming from, Jason, for sure. Like, and I think your intentions, your motivation behind you, I think is like more proper than mine was or is, in that it sounds like your motivation is more about less concerned with how you are perceived, but more about seems more about how it will make other people. I don't know how to word it, but it just seems like your motivation behind it is like it's a decent motivation as compared with mine, which was more like concerned with myself, right? Like if I say that I'm a Christian, I would say I'm not a Christian. I don't call myself a Christian. I'm a follower of Christ, right? I would just say like whatever. Like, if you look at the definition of the word Christian, like that's what I consider myself to be, regardless of all the theological and doctrinal stuff that might come along in certain Christian denominations or whatever. So what was I trying to say with all that? It's just like, if I were to feel like I needed to encourage you not call yourself a Christian, which I don't think I need to encourage you to do that, but if I felt like I needed to encourage you to do that, it would just be that, like, rather than not calling yourself a Christian for the sake of maybe these other people that you're talking to, just be like very reserved in what you talk about theologically and stuff like that, even though it kind of sucks, because then it's like, well, if I'm going to talk about my faith, if I'm going to talk about Jesus and all this stuff, like, I'm going to want to be able to talk about it in a passionate way about what I actually believe about it. But sadly, I think most people just really aren't that interested. I covered my face. Just really aren't that interested. You know, and it doesn't, like the thing that's hard for me to remember when I notice that in somebody else, that like they're not really that interested in tackling and wrestling with like theological stuff or whatever, or just whatever spiritual things. I have to remember that doesn't, it's easy for me to see that and then just be like, as much as I might say I don't look down on the other person because of that, I probably do. And I need to be careful that I don't do that. You know, like I know people that have just very, very, very simple faith, right? And they'll say theological stuff that I'm just like, you know, they'll say stuff that's like kind of very formulaic, like, oh, well, if you just pray this way, then blah, 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 you know, like that kind of stuff. And that stuff irritates me. But there's also a part of me that looks at this other person is like, I kind of wish I could just be like that. Just be like, hey, you know. But anyways, I don't know. I don't have any like coherent linear thoughts about this, but those are just my ramblings.
Yeah. No, I really resonate with that for sure. Yeah, because it almost seems like sometimes wrestling with questions or actually following some of these ideas, the implications of some of the ideas, or some of the even the doctrinal creeds or whatever, if you actually follow the implications through, it's almost like a torment, you know? And it's like, why can't I just stop here like this other person and just be like just stop thinking? But it's like once the questions are there, it's just like I like the process though. But yeah, there are certain things that I've encountered that too, where like you say something and you're like, oh, I think I showed my cards a little too much too fast or something like that. But it's weird because you don't want dishonest. It's just like and I don't. That's what I mean. I've gotten to the point now where I don't. I find they can put me. I can be put in whatever category. That's fine. It's just I would still call myself a Christian, but it's weird to me that it's usually when I'm in conversations with Christians and talking about theological things, it has been usually the only times. Well, I don't know that I'd say the only times, but it's been the times when I've had to just at some point be like, well, I guess then according to what we're talking about, I would not be classified as a Christian. And I'm like I said, I'm fine with that. Because like you were talking about, there's two ways I guess you can approach it, and they probably both need to happen, because Andrew was mentioning like things can become too calcified, and so you kind of need, like Sam was talking about, someone on the inside to kind of keep things a little bit so it's where they don't become too hard and too rigid, and it doesn't become just some where everybody's thinking the same thing. It's just kind of some uniformity thing instead of a unity. So you kind of need someone on the inside. But then I've seen the other thing too, where people just they'll be in a church, they'll see something wrong, and it's almost like you feel the need to tear it down. And I mean, I've been there too. Like, I mean, that's kind of how it used to be, because you see hypocrisy. Everybody's got hypocrisy. You're always going to find it. And so then you'll be like, this isn't right. The church claims to be this way. They claim to be loving, and then they're doing this. So we need to just like blow this place up. And no, you're in a house. A specific example I could use, which this got me into an argument when I was talking about this, but this is just a specific example that comes to mind. There's a Christian university in my town that I live in, and they have a rule, like when you go there, you basically sign this thing and you say, I'm not going to smoke, I'm not going to be homosexual, I'm not I think you're not supposed to have premarital sex. I don't know. You sign all these rules. And then there was this and the debate was coming up because I guess they were talking about a girl who had gotten pregnant and the school was going to kick her out. And it's like, well, they're a Christian school. They shouldn't do that. They should support her and all this stuff. It's like, yes, they should. But then at the same time, I'm like, well, like, that's still their rule. Like, I don't know. It's just like you have, if you just throw out the rule, it's like, then there's no mercy either. There is it's almost like the compassion is not as meaningful or something. I don't know. I don't know what to do with it, because I'm just like, the rules the rule. I don't have a problem with that. Like why would you go commit yourself to this identity, to this school, to this house, and then break the rules and then throw a fit because they're actually upholding the law, like that they said that you agreed to? And so that's one part that's kind of absurd. But then I get the other part where it's like you kind of see the hypocrisy, and you're like, you want some sort of reform or reformation. So I don't know how to navigate all those things too. The only thing, I mean, it seems to happen like when I just take a step back, look at it almost like with a broader view throughout historically, it almost seems to just kind of happen. Like when I'm thinking of church and different denominations, it seems to kind of happen on its own. You have Christianity, then this denomination, and they're all like weird sister cities with like a capital or something like that, and they're still all somehow related. But I don't know how to. I feel like I'm just repeating myself and not making much sense.
No, that's I actually have some thoughts on that, because several years back in my church, it was discovered that one of the people who was involved in one of the ministries in the church had raped a girl in the church, right? An underage girl in the church, nonetheless. And the one of the leaders in the church had taken that guy in and was being like a father figure to him, letting him stay in his house, stuff like that. And when he found out, he punched the guy in the face, right? And then a restraining order was taken out against the young man that had raped the girl. So the from the church, right? So the church, for all intents and purposes, even though in a modern Protestant evangelical charismatic church wouldn't call it this, but they excommunicated him, right? Like he ended up going to jail, blah blah, all this stuff, right? And sure enough, even though it was like the guy violently raped this young girl, there were still people in the church that were like, I can't believe you press charges. I can't, blah, blah, blah. We're all supposed to be about grace and mercy and forgiveness and all this stuff. And, like those of us in the church who had either gone through a similar thing as that girl in the past or had known somebody, were all just like, what do you mean? Like the guy has to go to prison. Like this is a bad thing he did, right? Like, should, as difficult as it's going to be, should that girl one day like forgive him, like, or for her own best interest? Yes, she should, right? For her own spiritual best interest, hopefully one day she's able to forgive him for the horrible stuff he did to her, right? But that doesn't mean that there's not like actual consequences in the natural for what happened, right? And it is like, that's an extreme example. The example that you gave, Jason, is like obviously not as I don't think is as extreme, unless that girl got pregnant because she was raped or something, which is also terrible, right? But she broke the rules somehow. She got pregnant. She wasn't supposed to be doing blah blah blah, whatever. For those gray areas, which is like the example you gave, I think that's the whole not the whole reason. That's one of the reasons we're even here. Like, it's one of the reasons that we're all not just like mini literal clones of God doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing all the time, right? It's because God created us with a mind. He created us with the ability to, like iron only sharpens iron when it like rubs against each other, right? Like if there has to be friction there in order for it to work. So, I think that even like scales up into like the reason that there's denominations to some extent, and whatnot, is like, okay, that denomination doesn't believe this denomination doesn't believe that, and somehow because of the fact that they don't agree with each other and they disagree with each other, maybe this other denomination gets spawned, right? That's some like hybrid of those two, and all of this somehow, all these differences somehow are working towards a greater end in God's purpose, right? So it's like, okay, I don't believe this and you do. I don't have to believe that you're right and I'm wrong, or that I'm right and I should believe that I'm right and you're wrong. You should believe that you're right and I'm wrong. And together somehow we're still achieving the greater purpose that wouldn't be achieved if we didn't disagree with each other, right? So that's kind of like where I'm at in it, and that's really annoying to most people. So I accept that.
Yeah. Hey, Michael, do you have some thoughts? Sorry.
Well, I got a little bit of just what you guys are talking about beforehand, and it's it's interesting. So I just talked yesterday with a guy. I put a little clip on my channel, and like he was in a Pentecostal church for like his whole career. He has a doctor of ministry and everything, and he's a guy I worked with, and God called him to go work at this Anglican church. So he like became an Anglican priest. And to me, it was a really, really great story because like everybody that he was working with at my old church, like there's he was still like involved in some aspects. Like there's a Christian school, he was teaching a class, his wife teaches there, and so like, but it was like God was like, this is the place where I need you to go. And it's like, made the, it's like a really big change. So I kind of talked to him about that. Like, how do you go like from this one tradition to a very other tradition? And it wasn't really, it was just because he was following God, like, and that was where God needed him. And, he had to wrestle with a few little theological differences and things like that. But like, you have to think, behind all this stuff there's a God that knows way more than we know about any of it. And like, I think that's you have to have like that's your faith isn't in your like theological system, it's in the God that's behind all that stuff. It's like, even the Bible, sometimes people like people can get to a point where they are like too idolatrous, maybe, about like the written word of the Bible. And I don't think God ever really contradicts anything that's in there, but you can't, it's not just a book. You have to believe that there's somebody who wrote the book, and not just the people, like actually a God. And in that way, then you're responsible, because it's like I say, like being a dad, and like when I talk to my kids, they're still really young. They're just kind of learning a little bit of like responsibility and stuff like that. But it's like, if I tell them pick up your mess or whatever, and they could do it like in a really like technical way of like moving stuff and like not real, but like they're responsible not just to fulfill the words that I say, but they know what I mean because they know me, and I think that's the thing that you always have to like keep in mind. It's like, whenever we deal with these like conflicts and stuff, like, which is why I honestly I don't take hard stances on like almost any theological positions. Like, I might be like, I'm 90%, like I'll say I'm like 90% Calvinist, but I'm not going to say like 100%, because I'm like, well, there are people that don't see it that way, and they have legitimate reasons why, and they are good Christians that love God. So, I can't say like I'm 100% certain that I'm right. I can say I'm like 90%, or even just say like, this seems like it works for me, like, I don't know, maybe it's personality types and stuff, but it's cool. And like, so my friend there, like, he kind of opened a lot of people's eyes to be like, oh, we didn't, maybe, here in a Pentecostal church, we wouldn't have looked at that Anglican church and thought like that's a place where God's really doing stuff. But now that this guy that we know and we love, and we know he's a great guy, he's working there, then there must be more going on there than we thought at first glance. So I think it's cool, just like when you hear stories like that kind of break the typical narrative about these sort of disagreements.
Yeah. Sure. Hey, Chad. Hey, Mitch. Both of you
Hey
guys.
there.
Do any of you guys have any thoughts?
My pastor actually
God said no. Mitch, you want to take it away till he comes back? I didn't. Do you have any thoughts on it?
We may have changed a lot of subjects since I was really keeping up. I think you should go on calling yourself a Christian.
Well, is that all? Is that all? Well, see, that's the thing. You get to that was my point. Is like you say I'm fine with that. That's what I mean. It would get to the point where if Christians are so in I guess, sorry, I'm really fumbling over my words right now. Getting back to like the Sam thing with the Trinitarian thing, and if Sam says I'm a Unitarian, is the Trinitarian the affirmation of Trinity such a foundational belief to the Christian identity that collectively Christianity would say that is not defined as Christian. And then, because even myself, like I would affirm the Trinity, but I don't think when I start to get into it and explain that what I think about it, I would be surprised when people see it the same way I do. Like I usually don't see it the same way I think most Christians do. So there's a weird way where like even though I'm affirming it, it almost seems like a weird underhanded thing. And so I'm like, if I start describing it to people and they're like, okay, this is not what we believe at all, this is not Christian, then I have to be like, okay, well then I'm not a Christian. Now what do I do with it now? And I'm okay with doing that. I'm just like, I don't know. I guess that's what I mean is I would want to go around calling myself a Christian, knowing inside of me, like I believe all these, I will affirm these things, but I believe in them all differently than normal Christians do. And so when people further question me about it, they're like, hey, wait, this is not what Christianity is. And I'm like, well, then I just don't want to be you know what I mean? I'm not like, you don't want to be untrue to the collective definition in a way, because like you get to decide, like you'll tell me, go on calling yourself a Christian. If another Christian says that and collectively they all say that, then I'm fine with that. Oh man, I should have let Chad go. He was back. Come back, Chad.
What do you mean by like by collective Christianity? Would you mean like the majority of Christians, or like some kind of Christian consensus or something? Because my gut response is, no matter what your thoughts are on any particular topic in Christianity, the vast majority of Christians haven't thought more than like 5 minutes about it.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
no matter what your thoughts are, they're not going to have a thought about it until that moment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I guess.
sorry about
I mean,
that.
it seems. Go ahead, Chad. In case
I was just gonna
I
say
don't wanna
sorry, I
lose you.
dropped out. I had a phone call come in and I had to take it. So, but what I was gonna say was, yeah, my pastor ended up leaving the Anglican Church after being there for several years. He was a school teacher first, and then he became Anglican pastor or father or whatever, and then he ended up leaving that and going to this Lutheran church. And so that's kind of an interesting twist to Michael Satori's story in a strange way.
Yeah.
So, but I agree too with what Christian just said about, and also good to see a Christian. There's a dude I'm working with, and I asked him today if like what his thoughts are on God and stuff, and he's like, yeah, I'm a couple of years ago I started reading the Bible and stuff, and I haven't joined a church or anything, but he's like, I really think a lot about it. And then we started talking about stuff, and exactly like what you're saying, like there's nowhere near the amount of questions. Like he has the standard questions, which is interesting to me how like deeply uh, theologically interested in this stuff that we are over here. And I wonder how important it really is. And if you're like me, it probably has a lot to do with neuroticism and ego. But I don't mean that insulting. That's like that's the truth about me. So
Yeah.
Right.
No, I think you're
Speaking
right.
of neuroticism and having to leave, I've got to go.
All right,
But
Andrew.
it's been
Thanks
great
for
talking to
stopping in.
y'all. Have a good
Yeah.
one.
You too.
you guys are gonna hang out with me while I build some bathroom.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I think because I think what Chad was getting at with the neuroticism thing, right? When he was saying like it's not a dig or anything, is that it's kind of like a personality characteristic, right? And I think the internet in general is like not representative of humanity in general, and then this little corner is certainly not representative of the world at large. So that's another thing that I know. So when I first like really got sucked into this little corner, that happened at the same time that I was not going to church anymore. And it wasn't like a rebellious thing that I wasn't going to church. I was just lazy, right? So I moved to be like over an hour drive away from church, and I was like, I'm not going to commute all that way, blah blah blah. And then when I finally started going back to church regularly, like a few months ago, I was like, oh yeah, like this little corner is really freaking weird. Like, I love it, and it suits me so well, but it is not normal.
Yeah. I was thinking about that today, how it's, they call it an estuary, and how it's a weird, like, that murky water between salt water and fresh water. It's how Paul described it before. And like, it really is some sort of strange baptism over here where you just kind of get plunged into this mixture of God knows what. But it's fun. Yeah, it's a great space for sure.
Sometimes I wonder what are our motives, because the meaning crisis was something that brought a lot of us, or at least the conversation around the meaning crisis, and Jordan Peterson, and then, but like, what is the motives? Because sometimes I think, am I really just trying to game the system? Am I really like? I really think sometimes that's what it is, and so that's weird to me a little bit,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question to ask. So this might get a little bit weirdly Peugeotian, I guess. But the Mathieu Peugeot, the stuff he talked about, the videos he made last year, really stuck with me, and I've still been trying to wrestle with them. But the motive, so I don't. There is this tension like within the motive, and the only thing I can think of is it is just not wanting to calcify and fall into some form of stasis, because that just resolves in like death or something like that. It's almost like the motive of his life, and it makes me think like all the questions we're asking here, because if the way they frame it is the feminine aspect is a question, so you have the masculine aspect is the one that names things, so it would name Christianity, it would name the order, the identity, and then the feminine would ask question, well, I'm going to take this identity, this seed, whatever this is, thing you're calling Christian, and I'm going to ask, is this still Christian? Like, so you could say, we'd say, this is Christianity, these are the beliefs, and then you'd ask, well, is Unitarianism, is that still Christian? So the feminine is taking the original seed and it's trying to almost give birth to something new. Like, okay, well, now we have Lutheranism or something like this, but it's still Christian, but it's still, and that's the only thing I can think of, is it's trying to not let things clamp down too much and harden too much and die and calcify, like Andrew was talking about. And so these questions and the wrestling like we do over here is almost in a way trying to break that seed open and give life to not something different, like it still has the original seed, original identity within it, but it looks different in a way too, because it's not, it's the same but it isn't. And that's I think, like, maybe in the purest of hearts is what we're trying to do over here, is and that's the motive and the tension we wrestle with, is because we just start trying to avoid that that calcification or whatever. That's even a word. I don't know.
I guess a more cynical read on it would be that we are trying to avoid
hell.
No, that we're trying to avoid doing anything. Like if we're always asking the questions, if we're always in the feminine questioning stage, then we never have to be accountable to anything or do anything or go anywhere or risk leading. Or,
yeah, that is true. That's a very good point. Because you need to not, I mean, it's not like an alteration of the original identity or something like that. Like you're saying, you do have the original. I guess that's what I'm saying, why I don't necessarily agree with people going and trying to disrupt the formation of things. Like I wouldn't go into a Catholic church and try to disrupt the Mass because I think it's too orderly or something like that, And if they told me I couldn't have communion, I'd be like, that's fine. Do you want to get lunch afterward? And then we'd still have communion. It just would be the Catholic Mass communion. You know, we'd be eating something different, but it'd still be fellowship in a way. And you still like that more compact identity or something, but then there's a weird way where like that everything outside of that can't necessarily be damned. And maybe that kind of gets into the whole thing of what actually, I don't know. Someone else take it from here. I don't know what I'm saying anymore.
Well, I mean, I do think I don't know. It's interesting now. I think the thing that we have, like with the internet, not even just specifically with this corner, but there's like a lot of places where it's just like people are discovering a lot of new stuff that they didn't know. It's different from their growing up, and I think that's overall a really good thing. Because a lot of times, if you encounter somebody that like doesn't know any Christians and they find out you're a Christian or whatever, and they'll ask you like some really weird thing like this, just like based on like the one other interaction they had with Christian people or what they saw about Christian people on TV or something. And then it's like, oh, well, the more different kinds of Christians you come in contact with, you will learn that there are more differences. And I think, maybe at first, like those differences seem to be the thing that dominates. But then once you get to know more and more and more, the differences become a lot less important than the similarities. And, there's going to be the people that are like on the fringe that are like the most extreme case. But most of us probably won't. If you're in this corner, you're probably not going to be there. I mean, so it's like if you go to like some little independent fundamentalist Baptist church, those 30 people in that room are like pretty convinced that they're the only people in the whole planet that's probably going to heaven and everyone else is doomed. And like to try to convince them that like there are genuine believers in a Catholic church is like, it's a pretty big uphill battle. And then, on the other hand, there's like some Catholic people that probably think the same way, definitely do. But I think like, I don't know, it's all when you're doing that, you're kind of like letting like a logic override like reality and not taking into account the fact that like we are very limited in our knowledge and our understanding. And so we all kind of have to throw up our hands at some point and say like, I don't know the answer, but like I know God's in control. And some people it might take a lot longer to get to that point than others, so but that's the only way you can really live. You can't live if you think that you understand like everything in the world and in your life, you're gonna have to just act in a crazy way to stay there. Like you have to like keep everything out. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's paranoid. You can't do it. So you have to be comfortable with a little bit of unknown.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah, I think it's like part of it. I think also, like when I say that, I think that all the different denominations and even beyond denominations, like part of the reason for those things existing, if I could say there's a reason for those things existing, is that it's a way for people of different persuasions to get drawn into the body of Christ. Right. So like, I've only been to maybe a handful of like very different kinds of churches, and they've each seemed to have a sort of, I guess maybe spirit's actually the right word, like spirit about them, in that I could see how the spirit of a given denomination or the spirit of a given church would naturally draw in people of certain dispositions, and again, like I find myself being, you know, like a weirdo at my own church, right? Because I know I know that there's a certain spirit about my church, right, where there are certain things that are, there are very few things, but they're very firm in them, that are like, if you go to this church, this is what we believe, right? And if you don't believe it, that's a problem. Not necessarily you're going to hell, but like it's a you know, it's a significant theological problem if you don't believe these things. And I don't particularly happen to believe in that sort of way. Like all of the Christians that I'm geographically closest to and have like the closest bonds to in the natural world outside of the internet, would be kind of like what Mike said about like leery of allowing for the belief that someone that goes to a Catholic church, it could be, you know, have like just as valid a faith as I do, or is going to heaven just like I am, or whatever, however you want to phrase it. Or if they're going to a Baptist church, like, oh no, if they don't believe in the moves of the Holy Spirit and the gifts of the Spirit that they're for today, and that everyone can speak in tongues and everyone can heal and everyone can prophesy, if they don't believe that, like that's a problem, you know. And I'm over here like, I would find it very strange, like the God that I know, like it would be weird for me to think that he is just kind of like has his back turned to the Catholic Church or Baptists or whatever kind of thing. So, so I think, so me personally, and I know I'm like, as part of this corner of the internet, I'm a fairly rare kind of weirdo anyways, but like, I see each of the denominations, I see Catholicism and I see Orthodoxy and I see whatever you want to call it, Jordan Peterson-acy, as all different like things that draw in people to at least towards Christ. And for me, I'm just like, hey, I am not going to do anything that's going to stand between somebody and the cross. Like if, you know, like I have a personal conviction about that where I would feel very, it wouldn't feel right at all for me to say, especially to say to like a non-believer that like, oh, you don't want to go to a Baptist church, or like, oh, you don't want to go to a Catholic church, or you don't want to go to Orthodox church. Like most Christians that I know in my church, they would be like that, right? They would say like, oh, you definitely want to make sure you go to a church that's like this, and they believe this, and they believe that. And I'm just like, wait, let them get to a church first. Like,
well, the classic, well, you want to be careful because
yes.
Yeah, you gotta be careful.
So, yes, and it's like at the same time, right? Again, like just being maybe overly self-aware. Like, I understand that there's like those. I'm the strange one in my church. Like, I'm very much aware of that, and not in a negative way. Like, I'm very comfortable in my strangeness, and I need to respect the fact that most people in my church need to not be strange in that church, right? In order for that church to even be a thing, in order for it to like exist as a body, everyone cannot be like me. It would just disintegrate. Like that'd be very bad if everyone was like me. Like everyone needs to be more on the like conservative side and on the dogmatic side even. Otherwise it's just a mess that's just gonna fall apart. So
could you say that you're like the gargoyle on the wall of the building? Is that how your church perceives you? Just our gargoyle, don't mind him.
Well, you know, I think it's really interesting, like in our society at large, like the effects of trying to make all like places and spaces totally inclusive for all types of people is that everybody has to guard themselves all the time, you know, and like, you know, and so the fact like that there's all these multiple churches even in small towns, like I don't see that necessarily as like some sort of a disunity, because there's like a comfort level there, you know, and like I think church, like a local church to me, it's like the next extension beyond like a family. You know, like a family is the place where you're the most comfortable, but it may not necessarily be good because some people have really unhealthy families, but you are used to it. So, but you know, and beyond that, like the church should be like the next step. And you know, like I remember at our old church, you know, it was like a very white area, and you know, we'd have black families in our church come, and then they would want to leave because they wanted to go to a church that was like mostly with black families, just because like it was not like a racist thing. It was like they wanted a place where they felt where they didn't have to spend time like translating cultural differences or whatever. And I think, you know, it's the same thing with like styles of worship and stuff, you know. So it's like I grew up with, you know, if you grow up with things and that makes you feel comfortable, you don't want to have to complain about it. So just go to the church where you like it. And if you like guitars and drums, then go to the church where like they have it. You know, it's like just be there to be comfortable. Like that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. And sometimes it's cool to visit and find out, like, you know, you can have the experience of like, wow, that was very different. And maybe you might be like, I didn't really like it, but it's cool that those people liked it. So.
Yeah. Right. And what I'm really interested in is, church is great, and I need to be there. And I think so I'm in a Lutheran church. I don't really care. It has really nothing to do with it for me. I mean, it's everything about like the community. Like we just had like a huge picnic, or not picnic, but like pancake breakfast thing for like, there's like 1,200 tickets sold, and there's only like 200 people in the church in a town of 2,000 people, and people from all the different churches come out when they're, like the guy said, he's like, watch this. You'll watch when the church is let out around, because they'll come in droves to this pancake breakfast, and then like there'll be a break of time, and then the next church will come in. So like I think that's pretty cool. And then so I'm interested in the community aspect of a lot of this and stuff beyond the church. Like how can I practice Christ-like principles in a community without having to evangelize. And so one of the dudes at my church a few weeks ago was like talking about these tents that we have for the pancake breakfast. And I said, oh, do you have a business that rents out tents? He's like, no, I'm a part of this Lions Club, and we rent tents, and we raise a bunch of money, and blah, blah, we do all this different stuff. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so he invited me to the Lions Club dinner. I went, what was that, Tuesday? I went Tuesday to the meeting, and I'll probably end up joining that club. Now, there's only one dude there who's younger than me. He's like 24, and his dad is there, who's been there for like, 30 years. But like it's a non-religious club. But like all the dudes there are all part of different churches. There's like 4 of the dudes there were a part of my church. Mm-hmm. And it was just really good to be there. And it was like kind of weird. I'm uncomfortable, like I'm just uncomfortable around people in general. So
yeah,
there's a lot to practice there that I want to be better at. And I'm not going to be able to just change my mind to be better at these things if I'm not like trying to participate. So
yeah,
I don't know. I don't really know what I'm getting at, other than to say like, what do you guys think about those kinds of clubs or organizations? I don't even know if that's a good word for it.
I mean, yeah, I think, well, I don't know. I think it's good. It's good to be in other places where you can like do stuff.
Yeah,
I'm not opposed to it.
I feel like it's a little bit kind of like what this is too. Like it allows for a mixture of different people from different groups to come together and meet. I might have to hop off here in a little bit, but there was one thing I was going to say. So Chad was talking about kind of just not necessarily evangelizing or being really coming out with these propositions, but more kind of just embodying and living a way of life and things like that. And Christian, you had mentioned like you're not necessarily the person that frames things around salvation all the time, and I'm not either. And so this is one of the things like that has been getting to me. And this is one of the things where it's like really pressing for me to whether or not on the edges of Christianity, I guess you might say, because to most Christians, if you're not a Christian, you're not saved. You don't have salvation. You don't. And some people would say, like, if you're not Catholic, you're not saved. Like this kind of goes, it expands it, all that stuff. But then I'm like, someone in the comments said something that I've kind of been. I haven't been watching them that closely. Some guys, it's hard to keep up with comments too. But I saw one. I don't even know who it was, but they said, according to the Abrahamic God, only Judaism and Islam would be acceptable. And part of me is even fine with that statement, weirdly enough. But I don't think that excludes salvation. And because my thought, like, well, what about the Noahites? Like, what do you do with that? Are they saved? Are they damned? Like, are they? Because to me, this gets into a lot of things, I guess, where like, if God chooses Jerusalem, he chooses one. It's like you choose the Ark of the Covenant. It's a very small seed, but that doesn't mean everything outside of the covenant is damned, per se, I guess. And that's kind of where I'm at, where I wouldn't necessarily even see when I have not engaged in conversations with Islam enough, but even in Judaism, when I get to the fundamentals of the way of life and even things, if people in Judaism and Islam approach Jesus as saying he could just look at him like a son of God, like everyone else is a son of God, like Adam is a son of God. And then say, well, he's just a prophet. You don't even have to say he's the prophet. Well, then just look at what he's saying and what he does. And it's like, is he presenting the way of life? Not just a way of life, but like actually the way of life. And to me, that's when I've talked to people in Judaism, I get down to the very fundamentals of it. And I question them about things like theosis and things like the image of God in man back in Genesis 1. It's like when you begin to wrestle with those ideas, I feel like you have to come almost to the same conclusions. That's about repentance and forgiveness, not just with God, but with your fellow man. And I feel like that, to me, is what Jesus was fundamentally teaching. Sorry to throw in my spills of just like, oh, here's what I think, because I hate doing that. But I guess what I'm getting at is I don't necessarily, if it's about a way of life rather than affirming propositions, and if Jesus was more about a way of life, a way of living, a way of forgiving your fellow man and turning back to God, continually turning to him, trying to see his face and trying to forgive those trying to seek forgiveness of those you've offended and forgive those who have offended you. If that is fundamentally it, then that would be, to me, what would be salvation and what would almost be knowing God. And that I don't know what that Christianity, that's what I'm saying. I wouldn't want to destroy Christianity, because I think Christianity should still be identified around whatever hard lines it is and ever propositions they are. But I don't know that should exclude salvation if salvation is about a way of life or something like that. So I don't know. Those are
right. Because what are we getting at here? What are we talking about? Like going to heaven, like to the place in the sky on the clouds, or what are we talking about? Because like I'll even kind of fall prey to that thinking sometimes too. Like, and that's what I mean about gaming the system. Like, I'm afraid to go to the fiery place. I don't know what that means when I really think about it. And so, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, what are we doing here and now? I think that's important, but I'm going to mute.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's interesting, because I was actually having like, one of those arguments in real life at a Bible study, and some guys wanted to kind of talk about this thing of like are Catholics really saved if they don't understand the gospel? And I'm like, well, okay, well, this is what I came down to. It's like, what is it, the verse in Romans? It says, like, whoever calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. So if Jesus is Lord, and then some people will argue stuff like, but is it Jesus or is it Yeshua? Like, what's the right name? But on a more fundamental level, what does that name mean? And the name Jesus or Yeshua, it means salvation. And so it's, if you are calling out to be saved, like, I think that's the fundamental thing. And the only people that are maybe excluded for that are people who deny that they have any need for a savior, which means they're completely unrepentant, And so, I'm like, I'm okay. Well, I'm okay with that, So, and, because I understand people who walk away from church or walk away from the name of Christianity because of injustice that's been done in those names. But by rejecting injustice, they are, in a sense, embracing God and his goodness. So, I mean, and that's the thing where it's like, well, sure, it would be easier to say we're on the same page if they would affirm the same propositional truths, but I'm not comfortable saying that person's out because X, Y, and Z. Unless if they're saying God's not real and I don't need God and I can save myself. Then I'm like, well, you kind of need to wise up a little bit there,
So Jesus or Yahushua or Joshua means saved?
It means salvation. Saved? Yeah.
Oh, so kind of like Jesus Jesus Barabbas? He was kind of saved, wasn't he? Or Barabbas? Was it Barabbas?
Yeah, it means son and father, I think, something like that.
Well, I mean, who knows what he did being unexpectedly freed from prison, how that changed his life. We don't really know.
Yeah.
I mean, he literally was saved. So from execution. So
yeah, there was something yesterday. I was talking to my friend Cal. I mean, you guys may know him. He probably pops up here and there. But he sent me a video, and there was this girl giving her testimony, and the interviewer said something, and she was talking about Jesus, and the interviewer made a point to say something about, like, isn't it great Jesus saves victims? And because she had been victimized, she had been raped, all these things. She had a horrible story. And she was sharing her testimony, and then I was thinking about it. Something about that kind of rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. And I was like, I think it's going to sound bad. I think that's true. But then at the same time, I'm like, Jesus says he comes to save sinners. Like, he doesn't come to save the righteous, like you're talking about, Michael. Like, if you're self-righteous, you don't need a savior. And if you think, if I'm in the place where I see myself as the victim, then it's a never-ending pointing of the finger to blame someone else and scapegoat someone else. And it's like, that to me is not the way of life. Like, that is the way of death, basically. That's condemning everybody else until it's just me. And then what do I do? Then I'm in hell, because then I'm just stuck with myself. And I could have all, whatever, the cloud in the sky, like Chad's talking about, I could have all those things. But if I've continually pointed, instead of pointing the finger at myself, like I think that's where it has to come first, is like, it has to be like, no, this is the forgiveness. I need it most. And then from that point, it hits you, and then it flows out from there. Instead of, I don't know. There's a way where, yeah, you can get caught up in even in doing things right, where you think your own righteousness and you don't need a savior, and then you're just, pointing the finger at someone else or something like that. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think that's one of the greatest dangers of some of the social movement stuff going on right now, is that it's simultaneously refusing forgiveness and insisting on victimhood, right?
Yeah.
And refusing to entertain the idea of gratitude, right? So, like, I have been victimized. Ultimately, whether consciously or not, that must lead back to God being the ultimate perpetrator. I have, it would actually be wrong of me to forgive my perpetrator because then I'm complicit. And how dare you insist that I be grateful for anything, right?
Yeah.
Like no matter how, right? So it's like, and I'm like, I'm not mad at people for like getting sucked into that. I'm not mad at the individuals who are like, I actually genuinely feel deeply sorry for them because that's such like a inescapable hole. That's like that's such a dangerous delusion to live under. Like you're just being robbed of happiness. Like whatever happiness you might be able to have in life or joy you might be able to have in life. Joy is what I meant to say. Whatever joy
Yeah.
or like peace or whatever that you might actually be able to embrace in your life, you're just being robbed of it. And it's literally an anti-Christian, anti-Christ spirit behind all this stuff. You know, it's
Yeah.
exactly in opposition to
Yeah.
what Jesus teaches. You know, and it's obviously what Jesus teaches
Yeah.
is hard, but it's also it's so freeing at the same time. But anyways, yeah.
Yeah, no, it was really, yeah, I like that you say that because yeah, in this interview, I mean, it was a beautiful story. It was basically, it sounded like a Mary Magdalene type story. Like this girl was like kind of I think she said she was pregnant by the time she was 13 by a married man. The guy actually I think murdered one of her children, the infant while I was in the crib. Like it was just a crazy story. So this is where it gets hard and where like but she gives her whole testimony and like the reason she found Christ was not because she blamed that guy, but because she realized, hey, I'm a shitty mother. Like, not only after this, I went and got addicted to meth. I aborted children because I didn't want them to affect my drug habits. Like, I didn't want to give up the lifestyle I was living. Like, the reason she didn't find Christ through seeing herself as a victim and blaming the man that she easily and probably, you could say she blamed, but she fit it through this end of herself, basically coming to the end of herself and saying like, yeah, through that, I think there was one point where she said like she even told she had this whole vision where it got to this crazy part where she died of a drug overdose and she's vision. She said, "Teach me how to forgive," or something like that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it sounds hard because it's like, well, you kind of just want to take the finger and just keep pointing it at that guy and said it's this guy's fault. It's not her fault. She was only a shitty mom because this happened to her because this guy did this. But then it's you got to point the finger at his parents. Then you got to point the finger at this. And like you said, it leads all the way back to God. And it's like it's a never ending scapegoating that just will leave you by yourself. And so it's like that. That's what I think I mean is like there's when Christ presents the way, it's like, is that way found in Judaism? Is that way found in Islam? And it seems to be from the, like I said, few conversations I've had, I said fundamentally because I press those ideas of theosis and the image of God in man. It's like it seems like if you really believe those things, you're gonna have to find that way because you can't you can't see God's face without seeing someone else. Like if the image of God is in man, like you have to forgive your brother in order to see God's face and that way of life. And you have to you can't go the road of scapegoating for all eternity. And so I don't know. I mean, it sounds harsh because it's hard to even get at those things because it's like, well, how do you not send someone into a downward spiral of shame either when you're like, hey, you need forgiveness. You're but that's what I mean. I think that's where when it's true repentance, it's almost like it's been about that anymore because you just kind of come to the end of yourself and then you see your old self as almost like someone separate from you and you just put that's what I said to Cal, you just almost put that old self on blast and you're like, listen, this is who I was and it was not good. And this one should be, I don't know, something like that. I don't know. Anyway, I don't know
That
what I'm
was
getting at, but
that was one of those realizations that I had because I tried doing this whole I could like blame my parents for like the the life I had and stuff, and then it just dawned on me. It was like, and a lot of this is through different kinds of taking the time to really examine my life. It just dawned on me I could have totally had different parents than I had, or than the ones I had, and I would have done the same exact thing. I would have taken the same exact
Yeah.
self-centered actions, because these are all just literally these are human universals,
Yeah.
to a degree, and just some of us just take them to further, uh, take them a little further than they than we should. But yeah, I've had those same things, dude, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of interesting to know, like, oh, I'm kind of the cause of all this anguish in my life, because I'm unwilling to do something different. And I do want to tell you guys this really corny quip, but I was reading this book called Conversations with God. And in the book, it talks about forgiveness, and it says that forgiveness is forgiving, not forgetting. And so I know that's kind of corny, but if you think about it, it's like, oh yeah, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Well, guys,
that's my
I do have to hop off here though, because I got to go into work. But I
gotta
will
leave, too,
let you
so-
guys. Okay, I don't know.
Uh,
Do you want to keep going, or just end the whole thing here? Are we all? Does anybody? I mean, I'll leave, and then I don't know. But what, are you gonna stick around, Christian, or? Oh, you're on mute.
I got stuff I should take care of before the wife gets home,
Okay.
so I should go.
Well, chat on your own. You want me to just end it or leave you on here and see if someone else pops on with you?
sure. I don't know. I'm just gonna be
Okay.
doing this. So
Okay, all right. I don't know if it might
I
end.
don't-
I have no idea
yeah.
how this.
I don't
this
know if
works, so
anyone
I'm
else can come on if Chad's just doing stuff with,
Oh,
because if there's
okay.
no admin to let people on, but I don't know.
Oh, okay. So he has to add them on is the thing. Okay.
I
see.
could be a saboteur.
Oh wait, Jacob's hopping on here. Jacob's
Oh,
here.
oh.
Take it up. Oh,
Kick him
Jacob.
out.
Where'd he go?
I'm leaving
Okay,
now.
add yourself. I'm moving it
Bye.
to you. There, he's
I
in.
should stick around for a
Alright,
second. Oh, good.
Thanks.
I've actually never. Oh no, where'd he go? Come back.
I don't know. All right, Jacob, you click it. All right, I'm gonna click it.
No.
There you go.
Click it
Okay,
before a
you're
ticket.
good. Oh, what is happening? I don't understand. All right, okay, he doesn't want to be on. All right, I'm
All
gonna
right.
go. Bye.
All right. Bye bye. Maybe I'll stick around and chat with Chad for a little while.
What's new, man?
Oh man. I was gonna say nothing much, but a whole bunch is new. But oh cool, Andrew's back. Cool. Yeah, man. I started doing a little acoustic worship night every week at my church, and that's been a blessing. That's been cool to do.
Nice.
Just kind of being a hippie and praising God at the same time, which is cool.
Sweet.
And it's nice because it's intimate. It's just me. It's in this little room we call the prayer room at church, and then at most I've had like 8 people there, but usually it's only like 3 or 4 people in there with me. And it's just nice. So that's been cool. But how about yourself, Chad? How's life going?
Pretty good. I got this new job, and so that's been really nice.
Cool.
It's kind of scary because there's like lots of new tasks that I'm not used to.
Yeah.
But it's been worth it. Like I was almost gonna not do it, right? Because like I'm like, well, I'm too afraid to do this, and I have to learn a bunch of new stuff, and I'm scared, and blah 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 blah. And
Yeah.
because I didn't just run away, like it's worked out way for the better. Like they ended up hooking me up with a company vehicle, which
Nice.
is huge because like I get to take it home. That's like a $500 a month raise, dude.
Yeah.
Which is really nice, because I don't have to pay for gas, I don't have to wear and tear on my vehicle, and I'm learning stuff, and they trust me, and they're like, and I like to work typically by myself, so they're like, yeah, man, when you get on the job, it's your job, you handle it, you do the thinking, and I'm like, I would have just walked away from that and then been the same old same. So,
Yeah. No, that's cool, man.
other than that, like I said, I went to that Lions Club meeting, which was weird. And I mean, the dinner was awesome, but it's a men's club, so they don't have any women at this one, which is so all that's kind of, I think, good for me. You know.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I'm similar. I tend to shy away from sort of like in-person get together things, but they usually turn out to be a blessing for me if I actually go ahead and put myself out there. So even like the worship thingy, I had at one point in my mind, I was like, oh, I'll just live stream worship from my office at home. You know, like everybody does live streams now, anyways. I'll just do that, and then I just really felt like, no, I should ask the pastor if I can go there right in the church and do it there in person. Sure enough, it's turned out to be a big blessing that it wouldn't be the same experience at all if I was just live streaming online. So,
Right. Yeah, that's one thing I haven't really been doing a lot on this week, the online stuff, other than some of these chats, but
yeah.
just kind of like what's his face? What Jason was just talking about the Matthew Peugeot conversations, and when he talked about ruminate, I think I've had the sense that I should be doing some of that right now rather than just go out and make content and like just ruminate right now, just chill.
Yep.
Just chill, So I've been taking the dogs for a walk in the morning, trying to listen to like music instead of listening to
Podcasts.
all the damn information that I could get.
Oh man.
Which is cool, but I mean, at some point, what are my motives? What am I really doing here?
Yeah. Well, and the cool thing too is when you, at least I found for myself, because I'll get like that too. I go through these extreme phases, right, where I'm just like, I'm listening to podcasts all day long while I'm working, whatever, or I'm just ingesting,
Right.
Eating up all the information I can eat, and it's like at a certain point, it just is like in one ear, out the other, or whatever. I'm not really getting anything out of it. I'm like, it's not benefiting my family at all. Like I'm just like, especially if I'm listening to a lot of Jordan Peterson or something like that, I'll be like irritable and whatnot, because I'm just, it's all just negative stuff all the time, and I'm like, oh, like this is going on and this is going on and blah, blah, blah. And I find that like when I take that time, I'm kind of in a similar spot that you're at, Chad. Actually, I'm in very much a just like the quiet mode, like sitting back, just kind of enjoying time. And then I find that that stuff that I'd been listening to and eating up for like months at a time, it like kind of germinates in me, and it like it's if I don't give it that time to like for the garbage crap that I took in to just like be waste and then the good stuff to stick around and kind of fester in me. Like if I'm just constantly eating, it never comes to its full like value to me, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, kind of devalues it. This is kind of one of those things I was thinking about with with all the compiling data that we have in the world, like where's the specialty?
Yeah.
Like what's it going to be like in like 100 years when you just have mountains and mountains and mountains of data, significant and insignificant.
Yeah.
Like where is the stuff? Where's the good stuff at? And it's like, oh, we'll have to go back out of our caves. It's interesting. So we were in caves at one point. We went out of the caves and we saw the world and did different things, and now we're back in the caves. And we'll have to go back out there. that's what prompted me to kind of do this Lions Club thing, because I'm like, all this talk about embodiment and this and that. We're talking about community all the time, and meanwhile, I ain't doing crap in my community other
Yeah.
than my AA work, which is good. I mean, I love that, but
Yeah.
there could be more.
Yeah. There was a point at least for me at which like the thinky talky stuff, like even though I was saying what I rationally thought was true, if I looked at my own life and how I was living, right, it's like it was bullshit, right? Like, it's not that I was actively trying to lie or anything like that. It was just I was living so much in my head that I'm just like, it has very little time to process and actually manifest in my life. But like, so before it even gets to that point, I'm spewing it right back out as if like I know this stuff. But until you really participate and let it like become your actions instead of just floating around in your head, it's not the same thing at all.
Right.
It's like trying to enjoy a cake by eating all the ingredients separately or something, you know?
Oh,
like,
yeah, yummy.
I'm gonna eat some baking powder or whatever. Like, oh, that's great.
It's hilarious. Like, yeah, I was talking with this dude today at work about this Christian stuff, and it was like talking about, Tom Holland and like the idea that, yeah, even human rights is like a Christian idea, like it's a Christian principle or ideal, and people who are even atheists today get to revel in the human rights of things, and they don't even know it. And this guy's just looking at me like, and what?
Right.
It's like, yeah, well, it all again. It's like, is this all? Is it just egotism? Probably.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
let's just. I need to get back into just. I discovered this band. I don't know if you ever heard of them. They're called Toad the Wet Sprocket.
No.
They've been around since like '89.
Okay.
And they're like a rock band. And I've heard that name forever. I've never listened to them, but dude, like I've been listening to them like crazy because I'm like, oh, this is so cool, dude. And like there's not like I don't know. I'm not getting any like information out of it or anything. Like I'm just like, oh,
Yeah.
I can be an observer. Yay.
Yeah. 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 It's funny because my father-in-law is pretty introverted like myself. He's like a million times more intelligent than I am. Like, and but he's pretty philosophical himself and stuff like that, which I kind of tend to lean towards that way. That's how I got to this corner of the internet, obviously. And then, my mother-in-law, his wife, she's like total other end of the spectrum, right? She's like a much more like practical, concrete, common sense kind of person. And I like never even really told her about Jordan Peterson, right? I would talk to my wife about Jordan Peterson and stuff like that. And then she must have brought it up to her mom or whatever. Because one day my mother-in-law was like, oh, I actually saw a clip of Jordan Peterson on Fox News the other day or whatever. This was a couple months ago. And in my head, I'm like panicking, I'm like, oh no, like this is terrible. And she's like, I have to say, I hated it. Like I agreed with what he was saying, but I just hate the way he talks. He just like, he's way, way too philosophical, blah, blah, blah. She's like, my husband liked him, but she's like, I couldn't stand him, blah, blah, blah. I'm just like, that's kind of exactly how I thought it would turn out, because it was a clip of him. It was the clip of him not, the clip of him responding to the question of whether or not he believes in God. Right.
Oh yeah.
So that, and I'm just like, that was probably kind of the worst clip of him that she could have found. Because he, like, in her eyes, he never answers the question, right? Like,
right.
Oh, do you? It's an easy answer, yes or no,
Right. That's hilarious.
And it's like when it comes to like most people, in order for like human beings to have remained in existence for this long, the vast majority of us had to have been very practical, very concrete, just like what's getting me through the moment and through the day or whatever, you know, like what are these practical things you need to, like, I need to know, like, what do I need to do? And if everybody was like philosophical and in their heads, we would have been extinct long ago.
Well, we probably wouldn't be able to get along. In fact, we probably wouldn't be able to have like any like meaningful discussion around politics or even religion. I mean, it's weird. It sounds like we might have gotten too smart to just be practical.
Mm-hmm.
Weird.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like
Well,
that's the weird thing about like all the complaints and stuff that we might have about the internet and social media and technology and all that stuff. All this technology came from like strange people, right? Like weird, introverted, intellectual, abstract leaning people, which is a very, very, very small portion of the world, I believe. And all of a sudden, it turns out they've created the foundation for like the like massive amount of interpersonal communication nowadays and information storage and all that. It's like I don't think we were ever. I don't think we're built to handle this kind of stuff. You know,
right.
not at all. Like, it's like we have this fake sort of what's the all-knowing thing? Omniscience. It's like this fake
Oh yeah.
omniscience, and
Well, yeah. Sounds like the knowledge of good and evil or something.
yeah, it's just
We certainly have that.
it's just multiplying that, right? It's like more and more and more knowledge.
Right.
Uh,
Well, hey man, with that said, I'd love to
yep,
continue to chat, but I'm gonna make some loud noises and I might as well just get off.
you got it. No, I'm gonna go too.
Really good to see
Take
you,
it easy,
Christian.
man. Good to see
Have a
you
good
too.
one.
You too.
Bye.
it seems that I'm alone. That's a shame. It's interesting that nobody's here. What do I do? Do I commandeer this situation? I was listening only in and out of what was being talked about earlier. I caught the last part of what I think Christian was saying, and I think he said something along the lines of, "It's amazing we've sustained ourselves this long, considering our hubris." And people wouldn't have sustained themselves if they were merely philosophical lightweight or heavyweights, or sitting in their cave just thinking. And so we would have not gotten to where we are today, I guess, according to that idea. The thing that accounts for that, I think, is if you've ever spent any time engaging with others, you'll and really thinking about yourself, you'd realize that you'd likely fall into demise quite easily and simply. And so why is it that we were able to progress and continue to live, considering our nature? And I think that the answer to that is God's sustaining sovereign hand over all things with a very specific plan for us. And so the only way that we're even able to continue to, sustain ourselves is by God sustaining us and restraining the evil in the world. I think very simply, you'd see that if not for the restraining hand of God, we would have been in nuclear chaos or total famine, disease, and otherwise that would have eliminated the planet and its population many, many centuries ago. And so, the providence of God is to be held up as the truth in that scenario. The other thing that's hard with these sorts of discussions around propositional knowledge and whether or not it's important to affirm, there are some propositions that people are utilizing in order to make the discussion even take place at all. And so what I mean is, for someone to claim a label or a definition of, earlier, I think I'd come in early and they were talking about, or I don't remember the person's name now, but he was saying, he doesn't want to say he's not a Christian, but he is a Christian, but it's hard for him to engage with others because he doesn't affirm all of the same things they affirm, or doesn't believe, or whatever that case might be. So the question I would always ask someone that's in that camp would say, well, you've already asserted that you are a believer in Christ, in the resurrection, and that's what he said. How does he know what Christ is? How does he know what any of those terms mean? How is it that he could even state distinctions and such? How could you come to an idea or a distinction when someone presents a creed, confession, or proposition? How do you even assess it and then state that you don't agree? If that's true, then it's very difficult to have conversations in any way at all. You could take even common usage of phrases. You would still have to agree that you have a very specific worldview or set of definitions, presuppositions, terms, and axioms that come to the discussion, while you refute or deny or distinguish between the particulars that are set forth by a person's proposition. So I don't think the issue there is whether or not things are known. Can you know something? I think in that case, the person's already asserted that they can't know something, or that they know only a little bit. Now, if that's true, then you have to account for what knowledge you have and how you might use that at all. That's how I would engage in that, as far as I'm concerned, because at that point, it'd be very difficult for someone to even make an ought claim. And maybe they're not making an ought claim explicitly, but they're implicitly making one. Because when they're acting and talking and making assertions or suggestions, they're automatically bringing in a number of propositions, axioms, and other distinctions that would distinguish them from other schools of thought or other ideas. So now we're just talking about a person's presuppositions and how one comes to evaluate these presuppositions in light of other presuppositions. And is the question, are all presuppositions equal? No. They can't be equal, because if they were, then you would have to invoke the ultimate as to what sustains or identifies the particulars in the two propositions. Sorry, I'm answering a question from work. Are there comments being made for this? Oh, there they are. Sorry, I didn't see the comments. I'm not a StreamYard guy normally. Oh, there's a lot of comments here. Okay. Secular Cornism. Oh, I think I remember meeting her once before. I'm boring. I'm sorry. I hate to break it to you, but it's just me and the mic here. I haven't prepared any material. So, it's free to tune out, I guess. I did not graduate in philosophy. I went to school for music. Should we organize to defend against rogue AI? Oh, that's interesting. Well, the question then would be, how do we determine what's rogue AI? Or do we just say what's rogue is something that's, physically harming people and killing people or hurting people in some way that we've evaluated as hurting? How do we organize and defend against it? Well, I think the first step is to organize schools of thought, church, and catechizing your children. Raise them in the ways of the truth so that they can defend, quote unquote, defend with intellectually, propositionally, with their worldview against, a rogue AI. An AI, and by rogue would be someone that's not, not pursuing the truth, right? So that would be an AI in this case. Number one. Number two, I would say arm up, prepare. Don't be stupid. Don't be lazy. That's a way to prepare or organize a militia of the willing against the rogue AI. You could see it as any other armed force in that case, or disinformation state, or propagandistic organization. So how, and maybe you could reframe it into something that's even more specific to today. How do you defend or prepare to organize to defend against rogue propaganda? Hey, Andrew.
How's it going, Bruce?
What's up? I was just fielding questions here from people that were in the chat.
Yeah, I heard.
So, rogue AI,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, you could argue AI is already rogue in some ways.
Mm. Yeah. I've always been interested in biomechanics, right? Part of my fascination with body horror, right? So when you start having stuff like YouTube, where there's the debate over whether it's conscious, but I don't think that's the right idea, because we're feeding our consciousness into it, right?
Yeah.
It's not as if YouTube exists in a vacuum and we're but people analyze it as if it's in a vacuum, like, oh, the YouTube algorithm. It's never the YouTube algorithm. It's me interacting with the YouTube algorithm, and the YouTube algorithm responding, you know. So,
I mean, at this point, the AI is still. At this point, the AI is still informed by models that we've created, right? And even if the models that, let's just state that it creates its own models, what is it using to create those models? You still have creator zero to deal with there, right? Like we created the AI in our image in a way. Not that we're God, but kind of in that case, right? We're the creators, so it has a particular set of rules that we've set forth and worldview that we give it. And I guess the consciousness question would be whether or not they could obtain or be given a new worldview. I would say like born again, as it were. Could AI be born again?
yeah.
And I would say no, unless of course we did it. It couldn't do it on its own. In other words, you couldn't give new life to yourself. So could the AI give new life to itself? No, it would only be able to manipulate or create life based on the life it's been given by human beings. So would it continue to be this, I guess, offspring of thought, right, of human creation or whatever. But I mean, it could still get pretty rough. No, I mean, I think you could still see how that could go poorly.
Yeah.
Imagine just giving weapons to some of the Boston Dynamics robots. You know, that could be pretty rough, even if it were short-lived.
Yep. What time is it over there?
It's almost 3:00 Eastern. We're going to get a bunch of storms here soon. I'm supposed to have a baseball game for my children this afternoon, and so we'll see how that goes.
All right.
Well, I'm probably gonna go in a few minutes. Where are you at, Andrew?
California.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Nice. Are you in Southern California, Northern California?
Los
Desert?
Angeles.
Oh,
So,
LA?
Yep.
How do you like it?
You know, lots of spirituality without community, you know. It's how California goes.
Are you from LA normally, like ordinarily?
I'm from SoCal, so
Yeah.
kind of suburbia.
Are you in college now?
Yep.
Okay, because it looks like a dorm that you're in. So
Yep.
Okay, I know those looks. I remember dorms.
Yeah.
So are we at? Maybe you've said this before. You at UCLA?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Do you, I feel like LA could have some awesome communities in some spots because there's so many people. You just have to find them.
I've told you I go to an Oriental Orthodox church. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Maybe I do remember that. It's a sort of schismatic Orthodox. That's how they see it.
They schismed from us.
Yeah, I know. That's the argument, though, right?
Yeah. It's funny because there's like no Western Rite Orthodoxy or anything at all. You know.
You mean over here?
No, in California.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, with the Coptic Church, there's no integration of America or Protestant land or anything. You know.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So it's really been isolated in a way?
Yeah, it's like so the thing with Oriental Orthodox churches is that like pretty much all of them got like taken over by the Muslims, right? So what tended to happen is that they got calcified, right? So people at my church will talk about how like well, I mean, persecution goes on till this day, but talking about church history, they'll say that like, oh, Coptic Orthodoxy was dying out in the cities, so they just imported some stuff from the monasteries to fill out the liturgy and whatnot. So you walking into an Oriental Orthodox church is like walking into a calcified 4th century church. It's crazy.
Why is
And
that? How do you evaluate, like, how do you know that that's true? What do you mean by that?
I mean, like, so at our church, they use Coptic for like a third of the liturgy. Nobody
Mhm.
knows Coptic anymore.
Mhm.
Like, it's people in Egypt who are Oriental Orthodox know Coptic. And when they chant Coptic, you can recognize theological terms. So on whatever live streams with Father Stephen DeYoung, Jacob will talk about like monogenes and hypostasis and
Mhm.
thesis and all that sort of stuff. And I hear that in my liturgy. But if I talk to anyone at my church about it, they just like give me a blank stare. They have no idea what it means. So in some sense, like, I can see saints chanting the liturgy because the liturgy uses the same language.
Okay.
And I think a Protestant with no knowledge of church history would just be completely lost.
Well, what would you say to a Protestant with knowledge of church history? Would they be lost?
I think it'd be easier, right?
It would be easier.
Yep.
It would be seen as traditionalism in a way,
Yeah.
which is kind of how I see most of that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it's important for Oriental Orthodox churches because they were persecuted, they remain persecuted. They cling to the faith, and if they want to survive, that's important.
Yeah, I've heard of this before, quite a bit of the Coptic Christian persecution that even occurred even in recent years in Egypt.
Yeah.
It's definitely rough. Do you have a pretty mixed congregation, or are people mostly immigrants, or are they Americans, or?
Most of them are second generation immigrants. So most of them are Coptic. You have a couple of mixed Coptic and some other.
Are you unique, or did your whole family go?
Very unique.
Okay.
Yeah, I am. I'm like an adolescent catechumen, which is already like kind of weird, and I am half white, half Asian, which is like completely unheard of. So,
so your family's not involved in the Oriental Orthodox Church then,
Nope.
outside of you? Oh, I see.
Yep.
Did you? So then, how do they deal with that? Like, how do you? I mean, I know that Orthodoxy isn't a big fan of evangelism. Not to say that they don't do it, but like, I'm imagining you're not in attempts to get your parents into catechumen.
No, definitely not. I do not think that my parents would be able to get through catechumenate.
Because you don't think, like, personality wise, or just like belief wise?
So, my mother is Chinese, so she has that kind of communist atheism with Chinese superstitiousness. Most of the time, it looks like a kind of perennialism,
Okay.
So there's I think that's part of what feeds into that whole Chinese tourist culture.
Oh,
right?
okay.
And my dad is he grew up Catholic, but he became evangelical. He's not too big a fan of traditionalism, so I don't think either of them would like or want to. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it sort of raises the question as to how you get you start attending a Coptic Orthodox church. Is this because people brought you there, or how did you stumble upon it?
So I got caught up in the whole Orthodoxy bit. I'm not some sort of crazy Protestant who just like goes into things. I looked at theology, and like a Protestant, I looked at the whole theology bit, right? Church fathers. I really loved iconography, and that's why I wanted to go to an Orthodox church. And so I just searched up Orthodox church near me, and the closest one was a Coptic one. I'd never heard of a Coptic Orthodox church. I knew it was somehow different from the East Orthodox, so I looked up the difference. could not find a difference between Miaphysitism and Diaphysitism, but so I just went.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're a product of the internet.
Yep.
In a way,
Yep.
or information. I mean, technically speaking, like before the internet, you could have seen icons and and then went to a library and figured it out. But so that's interesting. So do you find it appealing like historically or mostly aesthetically?
I mean, a bit of both, right? Like I can go to church and venerate the icons there and just that's it, you know, I love it for that. But if I want to, I can, you know, get into the theology, look at, you know, the history of the church and all that sort of stuff. And that can feed into my, you know, love of Coptic Orthodoxy, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So do you have like regular gatherings with the people of your church outside of this Sunday?
I mean, we have coffee hour after church, you know. So
Yeah, that's pretty typical.
Yeah.
But otherwise, like during the week,
there's a Coptic club here at UCLA, and they have.
you have a Coptic club at UCLA. That's interesting.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's got to be pretty niche, dude.
Yes, it is.
You guys are like not even on the radar, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, the first time I went, I'm pretty sure the people there were like, "Oh, here's this Protestant. He'll probably be gone in a week or something," you know. But I've stuck to him, and now I think they're like, "Oh, I guess we gotta get to know this guy." Yeah.
So what are you studying at UCLA?
Chemical engineering.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good gig. It could be a good gig.
Yeah. So far,
So-
it's been boring.
So you're
but-
pretty young then. What are you, like 20?
19.
19?
So,
Yeah.
Yep.
So how long have you been in catechumen? A year?
Yep.
How do you find it going? When's your baptism, or have you scheduled it yet?
We haven't scheduled anything. I've seen catechumenates that move faster.
Mhm.
I don't really want them to, you know. So, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so, but you're pretty solid. So, because what you're describing seems to be that you've basically a product of circumstance and location. Had you been involved in iconography and veneration, and you were, let's say, next to a Antiochian Orthodox church, that would have been the one you went to.
Yep.
But you don't find a distinction, or rather, you're not looking to find a place different than the one you're at. You're just taking the one down the road from you.
Yeah.
And that's how you started. Oh, interesting. So do you find it compelling to be as part of other Orthodox, you know, rites, or do you just prefer to be where you are? Have you distinguished why you prefer to be where you are outside of just locale?
I mean, I see it important to go to one rite, you know, like.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if you
yeah.
were, you know, let's say you had to go 5 more miles to a Greek church, would you, or you would not at this point, because you have made a distinction in your brain as to like, I prefer Coptic for this particular reason?
Yeah. I wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't be, on principle, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but you know, in practicality, I guess not.
So practically, it's just that Coptic is closer.
Yeah, and it's more familiar now. But yeah.
Now it's more familiar. Yeah.
Yep.
So, but I mean, let's say you get out of college, you're going to try and, I assume, find a Coptic church wherever you go.
Yep.
So, but do you have distinctions between the different rites that you can articulate, or is it really just preference? Like, do you prefer specifically, you know, Coptic for a specific reason? Just because it's probably old?
You mean like for a theological reason? Do I
Or any reason? Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm familiar with the Coptic stuff. Like, I know the chants now, which is amazing. For Vespers, not for liturgy. I love Coptic iconography. It's reminiscent of Greek iconography, so you know, but it's got that Coptic flavor, which I love. Going to another Orthodox church would be so for a Coptic person, actually baptized Coptic person, they'd be able to go to any other Oriental Orthodox church. For the Oriental Orthodox, there is a bigger difference between rites than the East Orthodox. So like the difference between a Coptic and a Syriac liturgy is greater than like an Antiochian and Byzantine liturgy. So you don't see as much like people hopping around liturgies, right? Like a Syriac person generally doesn't go to a Coptic liturgy. Like they can, they just don't usually. So me being a catechumen, I'm kind of in a weird place because, you know, I can be an inquirer at any Orthodox church, right? Like the difference between a catechumen and an inquirer is just like taking the classes, right?
Yeah.
So during the liturgy, like during the church services, there's really not much difference between an inquirer and a catechumen. So yeah, I've been to like East Orthodox services as a Coptic catechumen. And
So you have visited other parishes?
Yeah.
I was going to ask if that was the case. Yeah. So
Yep.
which liturgy does your church use?
It's not Gregory. I think of Saint Cyril. Yeah. I know some monastic communities that use Saint Gregory, which is longer, but you know,
I wasn't sure if the Oriental or the Coptics were using like something else. I've heard of Cyril and Gregory gosh, I can't remember the last part of it, but yeah, that liturgy.
Yeah.
And then there's Chrysostom's liturgy too that people use.
Yeah, the monks say if they made the liturgy any longer, the lay people would revolt.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah. You're Presbyterian, right?
No, Reformed Baptist, even more schismatic in that way. We're not typically welcome in the Reformed label for many. We definitely have we're definitely redheaded stepchildren. Maybe slightly better than Anglicans, depending on which ones you're talking to, but we're an interesting breed. Though I really do get along with Presbyterians a lot. I love them. We're great friends. I have so many brothers that are Presbyterian. It's similar enough. Westminster and 1689 are very similar, with the exception of the baptism and some ecclesiology. Right, we don't have presbyteries; we're independent. That's where I am on that. I actually meet with 5 now Orthodox Christians weekly. At this point, they're all over the place, but not all over the place. I mean, they're close to me, but they're in different. Some of them are in different rites, or different, not rites, but different liturgies. So you have like a few Antiochians, a few Rokor, a few Greek. I get along a lot with the Rokor guys, because they're all like super conservative. You know, like like on the secondary, well, probably more like tertiary issues. We get along. And we're real strong Trinitarians, which really binds us together. Like we're very close on all of those things. But of course they just laugh at me because I'm the weird Protestant that they think is schismatic from the Catholics, from the Catholics. Like they think that we're just like a part of their problem. But yeah. So, but usually the issues always come down to authority, as it's always been since the Reformation. Maybe even before that, but it's like who has the final say in your soteriology, and ultimately we say God, but they'll, I think they would say God, but then they'd be like, but this way, and then that's typically how they say it. This is the right way. Which I find interesting because they're pretty averse to like explaining the mysteries in propositions, right? They have that problem. But then it's like, wait a second, if you're going to do that, if you're going to say, I can't explain the mysteries in propositions, but I can tell you that you're wrong. It's like, wait a second, dude. You've just done it. You've implicitly done that. Because if you can't articulate the mysteries that tell me that I'm wrong, then you can't articulate the reason that I'm wrong. Right? So how do you do that? You can poke holes into like the positions of that I hold, but you can't put forth the positions they hold without an appeal to essentially authoritative historistic mystery.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how, like, if you ask a Catholic about the mysteries, they'll start talking about like transubstantiation. Right?
Yeah, they have them dogmatized, which makes it a lot easier to deal with for us Protestants.
And the Orthodox, they're just like, oh, it's a mystery, and then they'll keep practicing the liturgy and everything, just going about their day. Right?
Yeah. And I think that's partly why you see a lot of conversion from Protestants, because it's less dogmatic. And to be honest, now you weren't Protestant, is that right?
Yes.
Technically, or you were? Were you baptized as a child?
So I was baptized twice as a kid.
Whoa.
Yep. Crazy. I told you, man, my dad's an evangelical.
Well, so am I, but that doesn't mean we're the same, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. I see. He's one of those. All right. All right.
Yep.
Like Anabaptist roots. Okay.
Yeah. So he grew up Catholic, so he baptized me Catholic. And
so you got the christening Catholic. So did I. Yeah.
Yeah. And he baptized me whatever evangelical as well. So crazy.
Well, okay. So, did you make a confession of faith in the second baptism that you had, or was it, they just said you're old enough now and we'll dunk you?
No, it was, pretty much. It's kind of mega churchy type vibe.
Oh yeah, I gotcha. Yeah. So they added you to their nickels and noses.
Yeah.
Like their numbers and their money. Because whoever has got their baptism notches in their belt, they need those numbers. Pump that up. At least that's how a lot of that goes. So did you ever investigate Catholicism?
Well, I went to my local Catholic church, like the Catholic Center here on campus, and it was very Protestant, and I was already kind of moving away from that. So
what does that mean? What do you mean by that? Because this sounds like a term that wouldn't apply to Catholic, but you could essentially use that in some ways. But
yeah. So, all right, here's an example. Right, I go to adoration of the Eucharist, which is something completely foreign to me. I haven't even seen it in Orthodoxy, right? So I go there, and then it's like they have the kneelers, right? And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's great. And then they have silence, which is like amazing, And then they start playing synth music, and I'm like, okay, I can deal with this. And then I look up and I see like right in the center of their church, they got like Christ naked on a cross, like completely naked. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
So that's Protestant to you? Or is that, it seems like you define Protestant in some different way than what is common use. Is it because there's instruments? Is that like part of it?
How would I define Protestant? Most of the time when I say Protestant, I mean like lack of tradition, or lack of like a way to approach tradition.
That wouldn't describe me then.
Yeah, I know. Because Protestant is a huge label, man. Like
it's like saying Asian.
Yeah. Yep.
You're Asian to me, but dude, you're a different Asian than
Yeah.
many other Asians I've met, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is, you only see that kind of view in Protestant Christian.
What kind of
cultures,
view?
right?
The lack of tradition?
Yeah.
That's debatable, I think, because if you were to be in, you could claim Catholicism is tradition, and I would say pretty well steeped in tradition. And actually, and I would challenge you on this one, and I would say many of the Protestants that you're probably engaging with have a crap ton of tradition. Okay, and here's the thing. Anyone that says they don't have traditions probably has the most. They're just not the traditions of 400 AD or 800 AD. They're the traditions of 1954 or 1893 or 1689. A lot. In fact, so many traditions that I think it turns into a legalistic yoke in many of the evangelical circles, which is why they're baptizing you twice. So I think we're really talking about a battle of traditions here because they both have them.
No, I disagree.
Why don't they have tradition? Unless, of course, you mean like they don't speak Coptic and wear robes.
I mean, like going to my Oriental Orthodox church, it'd be like I don't speak Arabic at all, and there's mannerisms to Arabic, right? And they have even beyond that, they have like actual feasts with authentic Coptic food after the feast of the Annunciation and whatnot, and talking about like the Westminster Confession as some sort of tradition. Like it's not a cultural tradition in that way,
What do you mean? I mean, that's about as cultural as apple pie is to America to Brits.
No, it's not. It's some sort of document, man. That's not a tradition.
Westminster Confession of Faith codifies a number of traditions. But it merely just distinguishes. But that's not what I mean by the traditions. What I'm saying is there are a number of practices that are seen as required legalistic tendencies that are entirely embedded in what they would consider required. And if it doesn't go that way, they'll get ruffled. Like, for instance, go to a church and change the color of the pew cushions. Then you'll see some traditions. See what I mean? Those are legalisms in some ways, or just really strong preferences, however you want to see it. But they're definitely modern examples of tradition, but they're still traditions. But now we're just talking about like, how old is your tradition? And how true is it? Because I mean, there's even in the Greek churches I've been to, in the U.S., they use the New King James. Like the Orthodox Study Bible uses the New King James Version, not Greek, right? And I would imagine many of the Americans don't speak Greek that go to or read it that go to these churches, and so that's a new tradition, arguably more radical than the color of the carpet or the style of icon, to change the Holy Scriptures language and the words that are used in the liturgy. Some of the chants are in English in these churches. That's a pretty big departure.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's a departure. It's like translation.
Significant change.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, the Coptic uses the Coptic language, right?
Yep.
And that's arguably one of the oldest.
Liturgical languages? Yeah, I guess so. You could say Syriac. Yeah.
It's pretty old.
Yeah.
So, we could do the no true Scotsman thing, I suppose. But and then even some people have said,
Bruce, you're killing me. You're killing me. There's a difference between when I talk about traditions and I'm talking about how there's a feast after the Annunciation with a bunch of authentic Coptic food, and you talk about traditions and you go to the Westminster Confession.
No, I'm not actually. I'm not. That's not where I'm going.
Pew color.
I'm stating that your traditions are merely traditions of a point in time, and so are these people's. So now you have to assert that these traditions are wholly distinct from all other traditions and correct, and for what reason?
Orthodox traditions are more participatory, you could say, or knowingly.
Explain how that goes. Yeah, explain
Like,
how that goes.
Okay.
How do you
So,
like this define that from other traditions?
Okay, when I go into an Oriental Orthodox church and I look like this, and I've been only been going for a year, I can tell you a bunch of those people in church do not think I am Orthodox, and maybe
You
they're
mean like
right.
being Asian or looking like with a hoodie on?
No, I mean like being Asian.
Oh,
you know?
okay.
Yeah. But if I were to go into like most Protestant churches, like I'd just be like instantly accepted. You know?
And that's a problem at the Protestant side because it's
No,
like different.
it shows how little you guys think of embodied traditions. Because if I go into an Anglican church and I haven't been looking at the icons much and doing the kneelers and the silence and whatnot, and they are more willing to accept me as Anglican, like from the get-go, then I don't know. It's less knowingly embodied, you could say. That's what I mean by tradition, like an actual embodiment. Not the pew color, not the
No,
pew
I'm not.
cushion color. Who
I'm
cares about
stating
the pew cushion color?
right. You don't, of course you don't, but
Yeah.
you care about the icon style.
No, I mean like when you're sitting on the pew cushions, like
These people have the same ruffled problem when they go to churches where people aren't wearing head coverings in some churches. Right? They go to a church like, look at this place. No head coverings on the women?
Yeah.
And these are Protestants.
Uh-huh.
No, they're not. They're wearing pants? Whoa. Right? And then you, like that sort of thing happens all over the Protestant world. That's what I'm trying to say. These traditions are well held and held to dogmatically by many Protestants.
Okay, the problem is that when the term Protestant encompasses both the initial reformers, right, and the mega church down the street.
Yeah, I think you just made a straw man with the term because you don't like and believe me, I don't like them either, but for different reasons.
Okay, so when we talk about Protestant, when this little corner uses the term Protestant, we're not really attacking Protestantism as a polity or as a group, as a religious tradition or whatever. We're focusing on the bits that like other religious traditions haven't incorporated and remain unique to Protestantism.
My argument is they're not unique to Protestantism. That's what I'm trying to make to you with this argument of tradition, because there is indeed a difference. Okay. There is indeed a bunch of tradition across that board.
I agree that. Okay, I still think we're missing each other.
I think you just have a hard time defining traditions and then pitting the traditions against each other. Because now you're pitting them against each other and stating that this one's the better tradition because it's a tradition, but it's not because it's a tradition. It's for some other reason.
Okay, I think there's a difference when I say tradition and I mean some sort of practice, and you say tradition and you.
And I mean some sort of practice. I do mean some sort of practice. Okay. I do entirely. Okay. Yeah, we agree on that definition. I think that's true. So many people have traditions across many facets of life, including church.
Bunch of Protestant churches that do not have traditions, like the yes.
What
mega churches?
What tradition? What don't they have?
Traditions.
Wait, okay. So every mega church that I've been to has all of these same things, and they are indeed traditions. Right? Music, coffee in the front, people with nice clothing, trendy music, like new stuff. Scripture alone, right? These are all traditions. We could even go so far as to like the method of baptism, right? So that would be a big tradition, which is immersion for most mega churches. They're most Baptist. Most of them are Baptist in their baptism belief, which is a serious tradition to a degree where they're baptizing people many times.
Okay, so
that is a practice.
Okay. I agree with you, and a lot of those, you could say, traditions have been adopted by other religious traditions, right? Like, so Catholicism will have coffee hour, right? They'll have, I don't know,
which is
what
still
is it?
relatively new.
Oh,
His roommate came in. Yeah. So my point is these traditions are across the board. There's all sorts of traditions. Now we have to articulate why one tradition is more specific than other traditions and why it's better, and articulate why there's a wrongness in another tradition. Yeah, Luke's right. That's so crazy. That happens a lot. That whole like baptism. Yeah. Old. Listen, they're all old at some point or new at some point. What are we doing? All right. Sorry, folks. I guess I'll have to go, or maybe not sorry. Some people are probably tired of hearing me. All right. I'm sure I'll hop on another time. Have a good night, everyone.
well, guess that's it then, huh? I don't think that Bruce has caught on that when we say Protestant, we mean the traditions that have not been incorporated from Protestantism to other Christian traditions. Like, we in this little corner are not attacking coffee hour, you know? We're attacking sola scriptura and sola fide and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Also, I saw that Jacob's in the chat. Just want to say, Jacob, thank you for your going through Noah or Jonah, Book of Jonah. It's been really great. I've when you start talking about the difficulties of translating I better understand how you have difficulties in translating this stuff when you go through it line by line in Jonah. So I'm very grateful and for you giving me that insight and for leading me through Jonah. So yeah, thanks. The Feast of Annunciation is tomorrow. Liturgy terrifies me enough. Feasts are. I've been kind of wondering whether to actually go or whether to just go to Vespers. I don't know. I think that's. I think that's it for today. Yeah, I'll sign off. Have a good one, y'all.